So I started a fly tying instructional series, sort of, and kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I meant to set it up kind of first. So in this video I'm going to be doing kind of the introduction for what I hope to accomplish with these videos, and also we'll go over hook selection since it's kind of the first step in starting to tie a fly. So the whole idea behind these videos is that, I wanted to make something that could help out, beginner level tiers, or maybe even give a couple tips and tricks to some of the more advanced level tiers. And I'm by no means an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. I've only been tying for probably a little less than a year right now, so really don't know as much as some people might think I do, but I've learned a lot. There's a lot of great people on, especially on Instagram and stuff, and a lot of people here on YouTube that, Davey McPhail and, the people at Tightlines videos and Curtis Fry and all them. It's, you learn a lot just from watching people tie, and, this is some of the stuff that I picked up, and I was hoping to pass on a little bit to some of you guys. And there's thousands of videos, I'm sure, about how to tie a woolly bugger, and there's thousands of different schools of thought on it. And really, a woolly bugger is a woolly bugger. There's the way that I think is best how to tie them. There's ways that tons of other people think that is the best way to tie them, but it's all personal preference in the end. So instead of beating the horse to death over this, I'm just gonna show you guys a couple tips and tricks, and hopefully impart a little bit of knowledge about when to use certain materials, and how to work with them and stuff, and get you guys tying on a different level than you started out with, and maybe even make it a little bit easier to come up with your own flies, and with a better understanding of what the good materials are good for, and what to look for in the certain materials. So as far as hook selection goes, a lot of it is personal preference, but there's kind of the three generic types of hooks, and those would be streamer hooks, nymph hooks, and dry fly hooks. Now I know some of you are thinking already there's tons of other ones, but like scud hooks and stuff. We'll touch on those a little bit, but basically the difference between dry fly hooks and nymph and streamer hooks is that dry fly hooks are normally made out of it's called standard wire, or even sometimes light wire, and that just basically corresponds to the gauge of wire that the hooks use. And here I've kind of got some boxes, just Dairiki boxes, and here if you look on this nymph hook, look at this number here, it's 1x strong. That means it's 1 time stronger than the standard wire. And you have dry fly hook, it just says uniform gap, doesn't have anything about the wire gauge, so that's just standard. And then you have a streamer hook, and that's 1x strong, same as nymph, 1 time stronger than normal wire. And then also if we look on the box, on this nymph box, it's hardly read it on here because I don't know why they can't move the print up a little bit, but it says 1x long, and that's just been kind of my go-to nymph hooks. It's just so 1x long, 1x strong. And a lot of them are 2x long or something like that, and those are all about the same. It's just the length of the shank that you're getting. It's 1 times longer than normal, or 2 times longer, or so on. And then with streamer hooks, it's 4x long, and I mean you can get up to 7x long and so on, or 1x short, stuff like that. And this one again, just uniform gap, nothing about the length. And these, if you look them up on the Dairiki page, they're actually 1x long with a standard gape, so you get a little bit wider gape on there. and just have a little bit of comparison. Here, this is that where it was Dairiki 700 or streamer hook, and this is 4x long, number 10. And if we take our nymph hook, see, it's obviously much shorter, but the wire is about the same. I mean, again, if this was a size 10, it'd be exactly the same as this, but since this is a size 14 and this is size 10, it's a little bit bigger. But basically what you'd use streamer hooks for is obviously streamers. A lot of people use them for stoneflies and your larger nymph patterns, and what I actually like to do for large nymphs, not necessarily stoneflies, because stoneflies get really big, but I prefer to use just bigger hooks. So like instead of going with this one because it's easy to find and fairly easy to tie on, instead of going with one of these for a this would be like a size 8 whatever hare's ear or something like that, and going with a streamer hook, I would go with a size 8 or even 6 nymph hook to get the same size body, but you get a better hook gap. Alright, and then this is another common type of streamer hook, and this is also a size 10, but obviously has a much bigger hook gape. But if you take the size 10 streamer hook that we just had and hold it up, the actual working length of the shank, is exactly the same. Now, given you can work down around the bend a little bit, but this is exactly the same. And this really, choice between these two is really depends on how you want the fly weighted and balanced and how you want it to swim in the water. But if you can get away with using one of these bigger, these are most commonly known as bass bug hooks. If you can get away with one of these bass bug hooks, it'd be much preferred, because you get almost twice the hook gap for the same size hook. And I mean, they're absolutely great on articulated patterns. Obviously, bass bugs and poppers and stuff like that, but really great streamer hooks. Now, we talked about the nymph a little bit. So this is a nymph hook, and this is 1x long, 1x strong. I prefer the 1x long over 2x long because you get a little bit more hook gap. Even with beaded patterns and stuff, you just kind of step down a size in beads, and you're basically, if the pattern calls for a 2x long hook and you're using a 1x long, you're basically stepping down a size. So on this size 14, if you want to tie a size 14 fly that the pattern calls for a 2x long, you'd actually be wanting to tie on a size 12, and that'll step down to size 16, because that number that we were looking at earlier, we have 1x long, and then like on this box here, it's 2x long. That's essentially saying that this one is, the shank is 2 sizes up from size 14. So this would essentially be equivalent to like a normal size 10 hook, where this would be equivalent to a size 12 hook, supposedly. I mean, on the original sizing, it's a little bit different than modern sizing. I mean, pretty much all hooks are going to be 1x long or something like that. But again, this is what I've come to learn. I'm no expert, and if you know something different that you believe is more accurate, and be sure to let me know, because I certainly would like to know. Alright, and this is a dry fly hook, and before I talked about uniform gap and all that, really the main difference between nymph hooks and dry fly hooks is that nymph hooks are, heavier gauge wire instead of like the standard or light wire that dry fly hooks are made out of. And this really just comes down to weight. I mean, plenty of people tie dry flies on nymph hooks and that works just fine, but if you get into, faster moving waters or, maybe less quality hackles and stuff like that, that really have a problem floating even these standard wire hooks, then every little bit of weight counts, really. So you can save, it's minuscule amount, but relatively it's quite a bit of weight by going with the standard wire dry fly hook. And then really those three generic kinds are really all based on, what kind of fly are you tying. Is it a streamer, dry fly, or a nymph? Then we get into, more specialty, I guess you could call them, style hooks, like these scud hooks here. I love to tie on scud hooks. I think they just look really good. And I'll tie a lot of caddis patterns, particularly a lot of caddis, caddis pupa, caddis larva. They're great for emerging mayflies and stuff because you can normally get away with quite a bit of CDC and hackle and stuff on emerging patterns for some reason. And they do give you a little bit more strength than these here. These are emerger hooks, which are essentially a scud hook, but with a straight eye and typically closer to a standard gauge wire, or even light wire on some of them. And obviously, as the name implies, they're great for emerger patterns. Tie a lot of smoke jumpers on these. Tie quite a few mayfly patterns on these. Sometimes caddis. I don't typically make caddis emergers. That's something that's kind of in the works for me right now. I'm working on a pattern for caddis emerger. There's plenty out there, but not one that I like yet. So really neat looking hook. You can tie plenty of dry fly patterns on this and just use the front portion of the shank if you want to do like a straight shank fly instead of wrapping around into the bend, and those can look really good. Get you a lot of open hook on there and pretty neat look. And then these are what are sometimes referred to as natural bend hooks. I call them stimulator hooks because I tie almost exclusively stimulators on this style of hook. There are quite a few nymphs out there. I know Tightline's video does one that I believe they call it like the 50-50 fly or something like that. They tie it on something similar to this, and I know people that tie nymphs on these and all kinds of dry flies, but these I pretty much reserve for stimulators because on the bigger sizes it gives you plenty of length on a dry fly wire hook. But the problem when you get on these smaller sizes compared to the big sizes that stimulators would be tied on is you lose a whole lot of hook gap for the size of fly that you're tying. So normally I would like to stick to, if I'm tying a dry fly, I'll go with the standard dry fly hook, or nymph, I'll go with the standard nymph hook, But these do have really cool, neat look to them. If you like them, that's your own preference. I'm not gonna judge anybody on that kind of stuff, but I do like to stick with the normal size hooks because or normal bend hooks, I guess I should say, because you do get a lot better hook gap on there, and that just increases your chances for hooking a fish. And really, when it comes down to it, hook selection is all personal preference. Like I said, I know people that tie dry flies on nymph hooks and nymphs on dry fly hooks, and you know, every which way you can imagine. But really, like I said a million times before, it comes down to personal preference. These are kind of my views on it, so hope that helps a little bit.